Sometimes a single act of compassion can change the course of life, not just for us, but for those we least expect. In the scorching heat of Krueger National Park, a man faced a choice between following strict rules and saving a life. What happened next would defy everything scientists thought they knew about lions, and forever change his career. If you're ready to witness an extraordinary story of trust, courage, and the hidden intelligence of wild animals, hit that follow button and like this video and stay with me to see what unfolds. The heat hit me like a physical wall the moment I stepped out of the Land Rover. Krueger National Park was no stranger to harsh African summers, but this year was different. The worst drought the park had endured in decades had transformed the savanna into a cruel, unrecognizable landscape. What had once been rolling plains of golden grass and scattered acacia trees now lay cracked and parched under a sun that seemed merciless. Patches of brown scrub replaced the lush vegetation, and waterholes had dwindled to shallow, muddy puddles or vanished entirely. The once boisterous calls of wildlife were eerily absent. The savanna had grown silent, as if the animals themselves had retreated from the unbearable heat, hiding in whatever shade they could find. I had been tracking LM217 for almost 6 hours. The male lion had been part of the pride I had studied since he was a cub, and over the years I had chronicled every milestone: his first cautious steps as a cub, his initial hunts, and eventually the day he separated from his natal pride to carve out his own territory. I had walked hundreds of kilometers across the park, monitoring big cats for 15 years, and thought I had seen the breadth of their behavior. But nothing had prepared me for the image that awaited me as I crested the last ridge. The lion lay on the cracked earth, motionless. He was gaunt, perhaps 4 years old, his once magnificent mane now dull and matted, framing a face where the bones pressed sharply against the skin. Every step of his movements was slow, unsteady, and painfully deliberate. His ribs jutted out conspicuously, his coat lacked luster, and his eyes, the most telling feature, were no longer the fierce amber orbs I remembered from months of careful observation. Now they were glazed with exhaustion, vacant almost, carrying a weight of resignation I had never expected to witness. Protocol dictated non-interference. Every park ranger and researcher had been drilled with the mantra, "Let nature take its course." Droughts were natural, brutal checks on population. Even when witnessing suffering, the rules were clear. Human intervention could unravel the delicate predator-prey balance and have cascading ecological consequences. I knew this better than most. I had written papers on the ethics of non-interference, lectured students on the importance of allowing the wild to correct itself, and enforced these rules in every field study. Yet, as I observed LM217 struggle to lift his head, to breathe, to stand, something inside me shifted. He was not just any lion. He was a life I had followed from infancy, a creature whose patterns I had memorized, whose successes and failures had become, in a way, part of my own understanding of the natural world. Watching him now on the edge of death, something raw and urgent clawed at my professional detachment. My hands moved before my mind could stop them, reaching for the emergency water I always carried in my vehicle, a habit born of self-preservation during long days in the field. 5 gallons, kept for situations exactly like this, now seemed insufficient to contain the moral storm inside me. I approached cautiously, aware that a healthy lion would never allow a human this close. Each step was deliberate, low to the ground, a silent negotiation of space and trust. The lion's nostrils flared as he caught my scent, a weak growl resonating from deep within his chest. A final feeble warning that life still pulsed, faint but present. I knelt several feet away, unscrewed the cap of the water bottle, and poured a small quantity into a bottle cap. For several moments he regarded the offering with something that resembled suspicion, perhaps a fragment of recognition. Then, driven by desperate thirst, he dragged himself forward and lapped at the water, each swallow a testament to raw survival. By the time the first bottle emptied, some vitality had returned. His movements became slightly steadier, his breathing less ragged, and a subtle spark of awareness flickered in his amber eyes. But what came next defied every principle I had ever known about wild lions. He lifted his head, not in fear or aggression, but with focused attention, staring directly into mine. Then, as if by choice, he stepped forward, deliberately, until only an arm's length separated us. His massive form radiated power, yet there was no threat in his posture, no predator preparing to strike. Instead, he lowered his head and pressed his forehead briefly against my outstretched hand, a gesture I recognized from countless Pride interactions, but never had I imagined it could be directed at a human. I remained frozen, the world narrowing to the sensation of his rough mane against my skin, the rise and fall of his chest, the faint musk of his presence in the heat. 15 years of research, thousands of field notes, and yet I could not explain this moment. The lion acknowledged something I had done, Bowen. Whether it was gratitude, recognition, or simply an instinctual response to the unnatural care, it left me shaken to my core. As the sun climbed higher, scorching the parched earth, I retreated to my vehicle, documenting the encounter in my field journal. My hands shook as I attempted to maintain scientific objectivity, knowing full well that the most profound part of what I had witnessed, the trust, the connection, the gesture of acknowledgement, would never make it into an official report. Only the observation of a weakened lion would be recorded. The rest remained a secret lodged between memory and conscience. By the time I returned to camp, the implications of my decision weighed heavily. I had crossed a line between observer and participant, violating park regulations, and yet the alternative, leaving LM217 to die, felt unconscionable. The night stretched long and restless. Sleep eluded me as I replayed every moment, questioning whether my interpretation was colored by anthropomorphism, whether dehydration had dulled his usual behaviors, or whether I had indeed witnessed something profoundly extraordinary. Dawn brought no clarity, only urgency. I returned to the coordinates with additional water supplies, unsure what I might do, yet compelled by a mix of curiosity, responsibility, and an unnameable instinct. From the first glance, it was clear that LM217 had not returned to weakness. His gait, though not fully restored, carried more strength, his head was held higher, and his gaze was direct. More astonishingly, he approached with purpose, not retreating at human presence. He seemed to seek something only I could provide. At that moment, I understood that the drought had forced circumstances that challenged every assumption about lion behavior, every protocol designed to prevent human interference. And I realized that my next decision would not only affect the life of one lion, but potentially redefine the boundaries of human-animal connection, scientific observation, and the ethics of intervention. The morning air was deceptively cool, a brief reprieve from the unrelenting sun that would inevitably return to scorch the plains. I had logged a vague research route with camp headquarters, masking my true intentions, but my mind was fixed entirely on LM217. The lion had returned to life, but something in his gaze suggested more than mere recovery. There was a purpose behind his movements, an intelligence that seemed to reach beyond instinct, beyond the primal concerns of hunger and survival. Each step he took toward me seemed calculated, deliberate, almost as if he knew that his path and mine were intertwined. I stayed in the vehicle, the engine running quietly, hands gripping the wheel as if it were a lifeline. My camera lay ready, every shutter click a fragile attempt to record the impossible. He stopped at a distance of about 20 feet, sitting back on his haunches, his amber eyes unwavering. And then, softly, he emitted a low huffing sound, a vocalization I recognized from Pride communications but had never imagined being directed toward a human. It was a call, a deliberate call, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The realization struck me in pieces. He wanted me to follow. Everything screamed for me to remain stationary. Male lions were territorial predators, their behavior unpredictable. A single misstep could result in injury or death. Yet the curiosity rooted deep in me, a blend of scientific intrigue and a primal recognition of interspecies understanding, compelled me forward. I switched off the engine, placed the satellite beacon in my pocket, and cautiously stepped out. Each movement was deliberate, calm, meant to convey that I was neither a threat nor prey. LM217 turned and began moving, glancing back occasionally as if to ensure I was keeping pace. The path led away from the familiar plains and into a terrain I had never navigated on foot. Scattered boulders rose from the dry soil, jagged rocks forming narrow corridors and shadowed recesses. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Every instinct screamed warning. Predators could lurk, ambushes were possible, and my violation of protocol would be catastrophic if discovered. Yet for reasons I could not name, I trusted him. He was leading me somewhere. The journey lasted nearly 2 kilometers, each step revealing more of the harsh reality of the drought. Vegetation was sparse, dust choked the air, and the heat radiated off the rocky ground in shimmering waves. And yet, as we progressed, I sensed an extraordinary purpose in LM217's movements. This was not random wandering. He had a destination, one that mattered to him. The rational part of my mind wrestled with the absurdity of the situation. Here was a predator, apex, untamed, guiding a human across his territory. The only explanation, rooted in instinct, failed to satisfy what I was witnessing. Finally, we arrived at the base of 2 massive rock formations that rose like silent sentinels from the scorched earth. LM217 paused, glanced back at me, and then slipped into a narrow gap between the rocks. My mind hesitated. Following a lion into a confined space was more than reckless. It bordered on suicidal. Yet I could not resist. I recorded a quick video message on my phone, marking my coordinates, and stepped into the opening. Sunlight filtered through cracks above, illuminating a natural passage that led deeper into the heart of the formation. The sound of soft paw pads echoed on the stone as I moved, the tension in the air nearly tangible. The passage opened into a small grotto, perhaps 30 feet across, a sheltered pocket of cooler air, and the faint scent of moisture lingered. What I saw next stopped me cold. In the center lay 3 lion cubs, no older than 3 months, huddled together on a bed of dried grass. Beside them, the unmistakable form of an adult female lion lay motionless. Her sides were sunken, her coat dull and lifeless. Death had claimed her quietly, a victim of the drought's relentless grip. The sight of her inert body made my chest tighten. These cubs were too young to hunt, too small to survive alone. Without intervention, they would follow their mother into death. LM217's response shattered every expectation I had of male lions. He stood over the cubs, eyes flicking between them and me, a silent plea etched into his every movement. By all natural rules, he should have abandoned the cubs. Yet here he was, a solitary male offering protection to young, not of his own. The implications were staggering. In a moment of clarity, I realized that he was guiding me to them, to provide what he could not himself: water, survival. His trust in me, a human, was unprecedented, astonishing, and inexplicably fragile. I approached cautiously, hands open, speaking softly, though I knew he could not comprehend my words. The cubs watched me, lethargic and weak, yet not entirely fearful. I unscrewed my canteen and poured water into my cupped hands, gently bringing the first cub to its mouth. The desperation in its tiny lapping mirrored the hunger and thirst I had seen in LM217 the previous day. One by one, I offered water to each cub, witnessing the gradual return of focus, the faint stirring of strength. Their eyes brightened incrementally, movements grew more deliberate, and the fragile rhythm of survival reasserted itself. Throughout, LM217 remained nearby, his massive frame a protective barrier. He moved little, only pacing occasionally, but his eyes never left me or the cubs. The juxtaposition was remarkable. A predator of unmatched strength, now a guardian, seemingly guided by an instinctive awareness of our shared goal. Each careful gesture of mine was mirrored by his calm vigilance. The ethical and professional implications loomed large. Park regulations explicitly prohibited interference, yet the lives before me demanded action. I could not leave these cubs to perish, and LM217 had implicitly asked me to help. My decision to intervene was no longer merely a moral choice, it was an imperative. I reached for my satellite phone and called Dr. Amara Okafor, the park's chief veterinarian and my oldest colleague in the conservation field. Her voice was a mix of curiosity and concern as I explained the situation, stressing discretion and urgency. She agreed to meet alone, understanding the gravity of the circumstances. As I hung up, I glanced at LM217. His eyes met mine, amber orbs wide, aware, calculating. In that instant, A silent communication passed between us. It was not human, not verbal, but profoundly clear. He had trusted me, led me here, and in doing so, shifted the boundaries of my understanding. I was no longer merely an observer. I was part of an unfolding chain of events that defied protocol, science, and expectation. The next hours would test every measure of courage, judgment, and trust I possessed. LM217's behavior challenged the foundations of wildlife observation. Could a predator truly recognize need, guide another species, and display what could only be interpreted as empathy? I could not know for certain, yet every gesture, every look, every calculated step suggested a depth of awareness I had never documented. The line between instinct and conscious choice blurred in the glaring African sun, leaving me suspended between wonder, fear, and responsibility. By the time Amara arrived, the stage was set for decisions that could redefine not only the lives of these cubs, but the boundaries of conservation, research, and understanding of animal cognition. LM217 remained calm yet alert, the very picture of protective strength. The drought-ravaged world outside seemed to recede, replaced by a fragile sanctuary shaped by trust, desperation, and the smallest act of compassion. I took a final, measured breath, knowing that this day would forever alter my perspective. Every choice carried consequence. Every movement was scrutinized by the most powerful predator I had ever known. And yet, for the first time in my career, I understood that survival, empathy, and understanding could transcend the rigid frameworks of protocol, and that sometimes the most extraordinary connections were forged not in laboratories or field guides, but in the quiet, deliberate moments where life and death hung in balance. The rocky formation exhaled a cooler, more humid air as I stepped deeper into its narrow corridors, guided by LM217's measured pace. Sunlight filtered in through cracks above, casting slanted beams across the uneven stone, illuminating dust motes that swirled lazily in the air. Every instinct told me to halt, to retreat, to respect the invisible boundaries of a predator's territory. Yet LM217's deliberate, non-threatening movements compelled me forward. There was purpose in his stride, a certainty that this path mattered not just to him, but now, inexplicably, to me as well. As we rounded a natural bend, the passage widened into a hidden grotto. It was a small sanctuary, roughly 30 feet across, enclosed by jagged rock walls that shielded the interior from the harsh sunlight and blistering heat outside. The air here carried the faint scent of moisture, a remarkable contrast to the arid plains beyond. And then I saw them. 3 tiny lion cubs, no older than 3 months, huddled together atop a bed of dried grasses. Their coats were dust-streaked and dulled, their tiny frames frail and quivering. Beside them, the lifeless body of an adult female lion rested, her sunken sides and lackluster fur signaling the final toll of dehydration and starvation. Shock and disbelief gripped me. My mind raced to reconcile the surreal sight with my training, with the ethics and protocols drilled into me for years. These cubs were too young to fend for themselves, too small to survive alone, and yet here they were, relying entirely on a male lion for protection, a role no textbook suggested was possible. LM217 stood sentinel, his massive frame a living barrier between the cubs and the outside world. His amber eyes flicked between me and the cubs, and I could sense an expectation in that gaze. He had led me here for a reason. I moved slowly, hands outstretched, speaking softly in tones meant to convey calm and reassurance. The cubs' eyes, glazed with fatigue, followed me, but did not retreat. Their lethargy was profound, yet desperation drove them to watch intently, to register the presence of a being that could offer water, sustenance, survival. I unscrewed my canteen and cupped water in my palms, bringing it to the first cub's mouth. Tentative at first, its tiny tongue lapped weakly, the liquid disappearing in desperate gulps. The second cub followed, then the third, each lap at the water strengthening their movements, restoring fragments of focus and vitality. All the while, LM217 remained immobile but vigilant. He paced only occasionally along the grotto's perimeter, his amber eyes never leaving me or the cubs. The sight was both astonishing and humbling. A male lion, a solitary apex predator, had assumed the improbable role of protector, and he had called upon me, a human, to ensure the survival of life too weak to survive alone. Every protocol I had internalized screamed against intervention. Unauthorized action could result in career-ending consequences, legal repercussions, and professional censure. Yet in that moment, logic clashed violently with instinct, empathy, and the undeniable urgency of life itself. I reached for my satellite phone, hands trembling slightly, and dialed Dr. Amara Okafor. Her voice, when she answered, was cautious but curious. I described the situation carefully, emphasizing discretion, urgency, and the extraordinary nature of the events. She understood immediately, her silence carrying the weight of comprehension before she even spoke. "I'll be there," she said finally, "and I'll come alone. Don't do anything else until I arrive." Her agreement felt like a fragile lifeline, a bridge between ethical obligation and the immediate necessity of action. As I ended the call, I watched LM-217 with renewed attention. There was a tangible intelligence in his posture, a level of awareness I had never documented in field notes or research studies. He shifted occasionally, brushing the cubs gently with his massive paw, repositioning them closer to the bed of dried grass, his actions methodical and careful. This was not aggression nor random behavior. It was guardianship. It was deliberate. And it was impossible to reconcile fully with conventional scientific understanding of male lion behavior. The cubs, revitalized incrementally with each offering of water, began to respond more actively, their tiny bodies stretched, tentative movements evolving into cautious exploration. LM-217 observed this with calm scrutiny, occasionally vocalizing soft huffs that I recognized as low-intensity communication similar to that used within prides. The juxtaposition was remarkable. A predator of immense power, typically governed by territorial aggression and instinctive dominance, was demonstrating behavior that could be interpreted as caregiving, protective, and relational. I struggled to document these observations with scientific neutrality, though my heart knew the profundity of the scene before me. Minutes passed, feeling like hours, until the faint sound of movement outside the grotto signaled the arrival of Amara. LM-217's posture shifted instantly. His muscles tensed, head lowered slightly, a low, warning growl vibrating from his chest. I raised a hand slowly, speaking in calm, deliberate tones. "It's okay, she's here to help." Whether he understood my words or merely the intent behind them, his growl subsided, though vigilance remained. Amara froze at the entrance, her trained eyes taking in the scene. A fully grown male lion standing calmly over 3 fragile cubs, a human kneeling beside them offering water. Her breath caught briefly, a mixture of fear, awe, and disbelief. I explained quickly, gesturing to the cubs in LM-217. "They're severely dehydrated. Their mother died recently." He led me to them. Her expression shifted subtly as scientific skepticism clashed with the immediacy of survival. Amara's professional instincts took precedence. She moved slowly, medical bag in hand, assessing the cubs. Each was dangerously undernourished, showing early signs of organ stress. "They won't survive another day without intervention," she said quietly, the weight of reality pressing heavily. I nodded, acknowledging the ethical and procedural conundrum. Official protocol prohibited such direct interference, yet leaving them meant certain death. LM-217 remained calm, observing each of her actions without aggression, a silent understanding seemingly guiding his tolerance. His presence was imposing but never threatening. It became clear that any action we took had to balance immediate survival with respect for his protective instincts. We documented everything meticulously: video, photographs, and behavioral notes, recording subtle gestures. The way he nudged cubs closer, groomed them with gentle swipes of his tongue, and positioned himself between them and the grotto's entrance. Time was both an ally and a constraint. The sun outside continued its relentless descent, beating down on a drought-stricken savanna, while inside this rocky pocket, a fragile ecosystem of survival, trust, and unexpected interspecies collaboration unfolded. LM-217's behavior defied explanation, challenging everything I had assumed about predator instincts, male lion social structures, and the boundaries of animal cognition. The urgency of intervention was mirrored by the careful precision of observation. a delicate dance between ethics, empathy, and scientific inquiry. We prepared the cubs for temporary relocation, balancing the need for immediate medical attention with the need to maintain the unique bond they had formed with LM217. Each movement was deliberate, spoken words minimal, gestures careful. The male lion watched intently, occasionally vocalizing but never obstructing. His tolerance and attentiveness were unprecedented, signaling a level of awareness and relational depth far beyond typical expectations. By the time Amara and I paused to reassess, the grotto had transformed from a hidden sanctuary into a stage for a profound behavioral observation. The male lion, once weak and struggling for survival, had assumed a role of guardian, mediator, and subtle collaborator in an unfolding drama of life, trust, and resilience. Every choice we made carried profound consequences: ethical, professional, and existential. Yet for the first time in my career, the lines between human responsibility and natural behavior blurred in a way that was both terrifying and beautiful. The first rays of sunlight barely touched the drought-scorched savanna when Amara arrived, moving cautiously into the grotto. Her trained eyes immediately assessed the situation, registering the cub's feeble movements, the deceased mother, and the imposing presence of LM217. For a moment, the air seemed suspended, heavy with disbelief and tension. The male lion, though formidable in size, remained calm, his amber eyes following every careful step she took. It was a delicate balance. We needed to intervene, yet any sudden move could provoke an unpredictable reaction. Amara's professional instincts quickly took precedence over doubt and astonishment. She moved with a measured calm, keeping her gaze low and her body language non-threatening. Her hands clutched a medical bag filled with essential supplies, rehydration fluids, syringes, bandages, and tools to assess the cub's physiological state. I explained the situation in brief, deliberate sentences, emphasizing both the urgency and the extraordinary circumstances. "They are severely malnourished and dehydrated," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Their mother is dead, and he brought me to them. This male lion has protected them, and I believe he expects assistance from us." Amara's brow furrowed, skepticism and professionalism warring visibly on her face. "Male lions do not protect cubs that aren't their own, and they certainly do not involve humans in such situations," she murmured. Her voice was low but firm, reflecting the gravity of our dilemma. Yet the evidence lay starkly before us. LM217 remained vigilant but passive, seemingly aware of our intent to help. We began by assessing the cubs individually. Their small bodies were fragile, trembling under their own weakness. Skin clung to bones, muscles undernourished and trembling, signs of early organ stress evident. The dehydration was severe, and their eyes, once dull and unfocused, reflected the tiniest flicker of recognition as water and care were offered. I knelt beside them, offering more water, careful not to startle LM217. He watched each motion, sometimes vocalizing soft huffs that resonated as low communication, maintaining his protective presence. We quickly realized that water alone would not suffice. Amara set up intravenous fluids, carefully inserting tiny needles into the cub's fragile limbs, while I provided gentle reassurance, ensuring LM217 did not perceive a threat. The male lion's gaze shifted from the cubs to us intermittently, amber eyes calculating, protective, yet strangely patient. Every movement was a negotiation of trust, ours to provide care, his to allow it without interference. The ethical weight pressed heavily upon us. Park regulations forbade direct interference in the lives of wild animals without authorization, and yet these cubs would not survive another day without intervention. Every step we took risked not only the lives of the cubs, but our professional careers, legal repercussions, and reputations as field researchers. And yet the scene before us demanded action. The choice was stark: adhere to protocol and witness death, or intervene and risk everything for the possibility of survival and unprecedented scientific insight. Amara worked with precision, alternating between administering fluids and recording every detail. I documented the interactions, LM217's posture, his protective movements, the subtle ways he positioned himself between us and the entrance of the grotto. His behavior was extraordinary, defying every known parameter of male lion conduct. He groomed the cubs gently, nudged them closer to safety, and occasionally lay down beside them, forming a living barrier against the world outside. Observing this, I could not suppress the awe swelling within me. Time became a blur. The cubs' strength gradually returned with each passing hour. Their movements became more deliberate, their eyes brighter, the first faint signs of playfulness emerging. LM217's attention remained fixed, yet he grew visibly more relaxed as the cubs began to respond positively. It was a delicate, fragile equilibrium. One wrong move, one unexpected sound could shatter the trust we had been painstakingly negotiating. We faced another challenge. The cubs could not remain in the grotto indefinitely. Without food, medical care, and protection from the harsh drought, their survival would remain tenuous at best. Amara proposed an emergency relocation to her private veterinary facility, a controlled environment where the cubs could receive ongoing care. The proposal posed yet another dilemma. LM217 could not be easily transported, and removing the cubs from his presence might provoke distress, aggression, or abandonment behaviors. The logistical and ethical challenges compounded, yet the urgency of the cub's survival outweighed procedural caution. I approached LM217 slowly, speaking softly, maintaining calm and deliberate gestures. "We are helping them," I murmured, though he could not comprehend the words fully. The tone of my voice and body language was what mattered. To my astonishment, he allowed me to gather the cubs into carriers without resistance. He watched each movement intently, following our progress, never interfering, his presence an unspoken reassurance rather than a threat. The journey from grotto to the vehicles was surreal. A human carrying fragile lion cubs, Amara managing medical supplies, and a male lion walking in parallel, maintaining a watchful but passive distance. The path back was uneven and littered with obstacles, yet LM217 navigated it with care, occasionally pausing to ensure we were following, almost as if he understood the purpose of our actions. Each step reinforced the unprecedented nature of this interaction, a predator not only tolerating human intervention, but seemingly guiding it toward a mutually recognized goal. Upon reaching the vehicles, we prepared the cubs for transport. Amara secured the carriers in a climate-controlled compartment, monitoring vital signs closely, while I maintained a vigilant eye on LM217. He settled nearby, observing without aggression, a silent participant in a process that would have seemed impossible to any external observer. His presence was both grounding and astonishing, an emblem of trust forged in the harshest of conditions. Even as we began the journey toward the veterinary facility, LM217's behavior continued to defy expectations. Despite the heat, fatigue, and distance, he maintained pursuit, loping alongside the vehicles with measured determination. The realization struck me with stunning clarity. This lion was not only protecting the cubs, but understood in some fundamental way that their survival depended on human intervention. It was a concept that challenged every aspect of traditional wildlife observation, and it was unfolding in real time before my eyes. Arriving at the facility, we immediately began the next phase of intervention. LM217 was sedated carefully for relocation, allowing the cubs to receive medical attention without causing stress to him or compromising their fragile trust. Amara and I coordinated each step with precision, aware that any miscalculation could have catastrophic consequences. The cubs were settled into a secure space, monitored closely, and administered hydration and nutrients vital to reversing the early effects of dehydration and starvation. Throughout the process, LM217 remained calm yet alert, a testament to both his intelligence and the bond that had formed between human and predator. Observing him interact with the cubs, even from a distance, was humbling. He displayed behaviors previously undocumented in male lions, grooming, nudging, and a measured tolerance for human presence that suggested a depth of cognition we had scarcely considered. Every observation challenged established scientific paradigms, revealing a layer of complexity in predator behavior that demanded rigorous documentation. By the time we concluded the initial emergency intervention, the cubs had stabilized. Their small bodies were stronger, movements more coordinated, and their eyes reflected the first hints of curiosity and recognition. LM217, now resting in a secure enclosure adjacent to the cubs, continued to observe, his presence a silent affirmation of the trust and cooperation that had been established. The ethical and procedural dilemmas remained unresolved, yet the immediate threat to life had been addressed, leaving a foundation for further study and observation. The first hours after the cubs were stabilized were a fragile balance between relief and apprehension. LM217, now resting in a secure enclosure adjacent to the cubs, had settled somewhat, though his amber eyes never strayed far from them. Observing him, I could sense a residual tension, a heightened awareness that everything occurring in this controlled environment was unusual, unprecedented, and, at least for a wild male lion, almost incomprehensible. The level of cognition required to tolerate human intervention, to accept assistance and to maintain protective behaviors was extraordinary, and it demanded careful, meticulous documentation. Amara and I worked side by side, cataloging every nuance. Her veterinary expertise allowed her to record detailed health metrics of the cubs: heart rates, hydration levels, organ function, and muscular recovery. Meanwhile, I focused on behavioral observation, using cameras, video, and handwritten notes to capture LM217's every motion, vocalization, and subtle gesture. We noted the extraordinary tolerance he displayed for human proximity, the way he groomed the cubs with gentle, precise swipes, and the careful way he positioned himself as a barrier against any perceived threat. Every detail seemed to defy the assumptions held by decades of field research. By mid-morning, the task of documenting behavior became an exercise in patience. LM217's movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. He lay close to the cubs, curling protectively around them, occasionally nudging them gently or guiding them toward the shade. His vocalizations were soft, deliberate, and seemed designed to communicate reassurance rather than dominance. I recorded each sound, every shift in his body posture, and every interaction with the cubs. This was more than observation. It was witnessing the expansion of known boundaries of male lion behavior. Yet with every note and video clip came the weight of consequence. The protocols of Krueger National Park were clear: unauthorized interference, removal of protected wildlife, and direct human involvement in wild predator activities were punishable offenses. We had already violated multiple regulations simply by aiding the cubs and interacting with LM217. The potential repercussions loomed like dark clouds over every decision we made. My thoughts circled constantly. If park authorities discovered the full extent of our actions, our careers, and possibly our freedom, could end here. The tension was heightened when we contacted Dr. Mojian Kosi, the park director, to report the situation. He arrived swiftly, his expression a mixture of disbelief, irritation, and scientific curiosity. 15 years in wildlife research had taught me to anticipate reactions, yet even I was unprepared for the storm of scrutiny that followed. He demanded a complete account: video evidence, behavioral notes, and physiological data from the cubs. Each piece we presented heightened the incredulity. LM217's behavior, the cubs' survival, and the voluntary cooperation of a male lion with humans were phenomena that seemed almost impossible to reconcile with established wildlife protocols. 3 hours of detailed examination passed, each one straining our patience and testing our composure. Dr. Kosi's questions were precise, probing the rationale behind every decision, the timing of interventions, and the scientific documentation supporting our actions. He challenged us repeatedly, questioning whether we had projected human motivations onto instinctive behaviors, whether the cubs' responses could be explained by simple survival instincts rather than genuine recognition, and whether the documentation provided met rigorous standards of evidence. His scrutiny was exhausting, but necessary. In that room, the fate of our careers and the potential validation of unprecedented research hung in delicate balance. After a tense silence, Dr. Kosi spoke again. His tone was measured, icy yet tempered by professional respect. "You have violated at least 15 park regulations, contravened national wildlife protection laws, and interfered with natural processes," he stated firmly. "Under normal circumstances, such actions would end your careers. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to shrink from accountability. Yes, I admitted, we broke protocol, but we saved lives. And this behavior, this intelligence, this cooperation demands documentation and study. What we've witnessed could redefine understanding of social structures and cognition in lions. He considered this carefully, then shifted focus. Documentation is compelling, he acknowledged slowly. There is substantial evidence here. Your actions, while technically impermissible, have resulted in a discovery that warrants emergency study under controlled conditions. Relief was tempered with disbelief. This was not forgiveness, not an endorsement of protocol violation, but a recognition that the evidence we had collected was scientifically significant enough to justify continued observation. Following the director's decision, Amar and I initiated a structured research protocol. The cub's recovery continued under constant veterinary supervision, with nutrition carefully calibrated, hydration maintained, and activity levels monitored. Simultaneously, LM-217 remained in a secure enclosure adjacent to the cub's care area, allowing us to observe his behavior without undue interference. Over the next several days, we noted unprecedented interactions. He regurgitated food for the cubs, played gently, groomed them meticulously, and displayed continuous tolerance for human presence. Every interaction was logged, analyzed, and cross-referenced against known behavioral patterns, highlighting the uniqueness of this case. Genetic testing soon confirmed that the cubs were not LM-217's biological offspring. Further analysis revealed that their mother likely originated from a neighboring pride fragmented by the drought. The implications were staggering. Here was a male lion, unrelated to these cubs, assuming a protective and nurturing role traditionally associated with female pride members. This behavior challenged conventional assumptions about pride dynamics, male-female roles, and interspecies interaction. The phenomenon demanded rigorous scrutiny and careful contextual analysis. News of our observations, though initially restricted to internal scientific channels, began to generate controversy. Some colleagues accused us of anthropomorphizing, projecting human motives onto instinct-driven behavior. Others suggested LM-217 was an anomaly, a neurologically atypical individual whose behavior could not be generalized. Yet the data we presented was irrefutable. Video footage, detailed observational notes, and physiological measurements combined to provide a coherent, documented narrative of extraordinary behavior. Public interest, initially minimal, grew rapidly as carefully selected footage was released through controlled channels. People were captivated by the story of a male lion protecting orphaned cubs, cooperating with humans, and demonstrating behaviors previously undocumented in wild predators. The narrative transcended scientific circles, sparking widespread discussion about animal cognition, empathy, and social structures. Our work, once potentially career-ending, began to gain support and recognition, illustrating the power of combining rigorous documentation with the ethical imperative to act in extraordinary circumstances. The controversy within the scientific community continued. Debates raged over interpretation, methodology, and the potential influence of human intervention on natural behavior. Critics demanded strict differentiation between instinctive survival behaviors and potential cognitive awareness. Supporters argued that LM-217's actions provided compelling evidence of a complex social consciousness, one that suggested a broader capacity for empathy, caregiving, and adaptive problem-solving than previously acknowledged in wild male lions. Each argument added pressure, yet also highlighted the groundbreaking potential of our observations. Within months, a research team was assembled to study what became known as the Krueger pride phenomenon. 12 interdisciplinary researchers joined the project, combining expertise in wildlife behavior, veterinary science, cognition, and conservation ethics. Their goal was to study the cub's recovery, LM-217's behavioral patterns, and the potential implications for understanding predator cognition and social bonds. The phenomenon, initially dismissed by some as an anomaly, gradually gained legitimacy through careful observation, rigorous data collection, and a transparent, methodical approach. Through it all, the cubs thrived. Their strength returned incrementally, their coordination improved, and their playful behaviors re-emerged. LM217's role as a protective guardian remains steadfast, his tolerance for human observers remarkable yet selective. While he never fully acclimated to humans outside of our immediate presence, he continued to exhibit behaviors that bridged instinct, cognition, and the unprecedented social bond formed under extreme environmental stress. By the end of the initial documentation period, the implications were clear. We had witnessed a previously unrecorded behavioral phenomenon with significant scientific, ethical, and conservation ramifications. The controversy surrounding our actions was unavoidable, yet the evidence demanded further study. The extraordinary behavior of LM217 challenged assumptions about wildlife cognition, disrupted accepted norms about male lion roles, and opened a new frontier in conservation research, one rooted in observation, trust, and the recognition that extraordinary circumstances could reveal capabilities previously hidden from human understanding. The weeks that followed the initial intervention became a period of unprecedented observation and careful management. The Krueger Cognition Project, as it would come to be known, was formally established to study the unusual phenomenon we had witnessed. 12 researchers spanning multiple disciplines, from wildlife behaviorists to cognitive scientists and conservation biologists, joined our efforts. Each person brought their own expertise and skepticism, yet the data we had collected was undeniable. LM217, now formally designated KM27 in our research records, continued to display caretaking behaviors toward the cubs that were previously undocumented in male lions. The cubs' recovery was remarkable. With intensive veterinary care, proper nutrition, and continuous monitoring, they gradually gained strength. Their movements became more coordinated, playful, and exploratory. From timid, fragile creatures barely able to lift their heads, they transformed into curious young lions, agile and alert. Yet what fascinated the team most was KM27's unrelenting commitment to their safety and well-being. While he had once been a solitary predator, now he exhibited behaviors that transcended conventional understanding of male lion social structure. He regurgitated food to feed the cubs, groomed them with meticulous care, and played in ways that were gentle yet deliberate, maintaining his status as guardian and protector. One of the most profound observations occurred during interactions between KM27 and humans. While never fully habituated to human presence, he tolerated researchers' proximity when observing the cubs, often displaying an uncanny understanding of boundaries. He allowed cameras to be set up near him, seemingly aware that his behavior was being documented, yet never displayed aggression or discomfort. His selective tolerance hinted at a level of cognitive sophistication previously thought impossible for wild male lions. Each moment of observation added layers to our understanding, challenging decades of assumptions about predator cognition and social bonds. Genetic analysis confirmed that the cubs were not his biological offspring. The deceased lioness, their mother, had likely originated from a fragmented neighboring pride, displaced by the ongoing drought. This revelation heightened the significance of KM27's behavior. He had assumed responsibility for cubs unrelated by blood, a role that defied conventional evolutionary logic centered on kin selection. The implication was clear. Under extreme environmental conditions, male lions may exhibit adaptive social behaviors, extending protective instincts beyond immediate genetic lines. The potential for such behaviors to emerge in other apex predators became an urgent area for future research. Public response to the Krueger Cognition Project was overwhelming. Carefully curated video footage documenting KM27's interactions with the cubs was released to the public in a controlled manner. Audiences were captivated by the story of a predator exhibiting unprecedented empathy, trust, and caregiving. Social media channels, wildlife organizations, and news outlets amplified the phenomenon, creating a global conversation about animal cognition, emotional intelligence, and the capacity for interspecies cooperation. Questions emerged. Could other predators exhibit similar behaviors? Was this a product of environmental stress, unique individual disposition, or a previously hidden aspect of lion social dynamics? The phenomenon sparked wonder, debate, and scientific curiosity. Within the research community, opinions varied. Critics argued that KM27 represented an anomaly, a neurological outlier whose behavior could not be generalized to the species. Others accused us of anthropomorphizing, projecting human concepts of morality and empathy onto instinct-driven actions. Yet the rigor of our documentation, continuous video observation, physiological metrics, genetic testing, and meticulous behavioral analysis, provided undeniable evidence of intentionality. The debates, rather than diminishing the significance of our findings, underscored the complexity of the phenomenon and the need for ongoing study. Over the subsequent months, the cubs were gradually reintegrated into a monitored pride. Their social development carefully managed to preserve both safety and natural behaviors. KM27 remained a constant presence, observing, protecting, and occasionally interacting in ways that maintained the bond he had formed with them. The juxtaposition of human intervention and natural instinct was delicate but revealing. Each interaction was a testament to the adaptive potential of apex predators under extreme environmental pressure and the subtle intelligence guiding their decisions. For me personally, the experience was transformative. 15 years of field research had honed my understanding of predator behavior, yet KM27 shattered every expectation. The line between observation and participation had blurred, forcing me to confront ethical and professional boundaries in ways I had never anticipated. Offering water to a dying lion, an act initially framed by compassion, set in motion a chain of events that redefined my career, my understanding of wildlife behavior, and my perspective on the cognitive and emotional capacities of non-human species. I was no longer merely an observer. I had become part of a living experiment in empathy, trust, and interspecies cooperation. Amara's role was equally pivotal. Her veterinary expertise ensured that the cubs survived and thrived, while her calm judgment balanced the ethical and professional risks inherent in our decisions. Together, we navigated the tension between scientific integrity and moral responsibility, documenting every interaction with meticulous care. Our collaboration became a model for integrating immediate life-saving intervention with long-term research objectives. Highlighting how fieldwork could adapt to extraordinary circumstances without compromising scientific rigor. KM27, once a solitary male navigating a harsh, drought-stricken landscape, had become a symbol of the unexpected adaptability and complexity of wildlife. His behaviors, protective, nurturing, and selectively cooperative with humans, prompted new lines of inquiry into predator cognition, social bonding, and the potential for cross-species cooperation. Researchers began exploring the role of environmental stressors in eliciting novel behavioral patterns, investigating whether similar phenomena might emerge under extreme conditions in other apex predators. The implications were profound, extending beyond lions to broader conservation strategies and understanding of animal intelligence. Today, the cubs are young adults, thriving within a monitored pride that balances natural behaviors with ongoing research oversight. KM27 has returned to a semi-wild state in a protected section of Krueger National Park. His tolerance for human presence maintained, but limited to the researchers who documented his extraordinary behavior. The Krueger Cognition Project continues to study the long-term impact of his interactions, offering insights that challenge traditional paradigms and inspire both scientific inquiry and public fascination. Reflecting on the entire journey, I recognize that a single act of compassion, a human offering water to a dying lion, sparked a series of events that redefined our understanding of predator behavior, ethical intervention, and interspecies trust. The scientific debates, public interest, and ethical considerations are inseparable from the initial moment of choice, illustrating how profound discoveries can emerge from acts of empathy and courage. KM27's story is now emblematic not only of the resilience and adaptability of wildlife, but also of the transformative power of human intervention guided by compassion and responsibility. This legacy extends beyond our careers or the cub's survival. It challenges us to rethink assumptions about animal cognition, to embrace careful observation paired with ethical intervention when lives hang in balance, and to acknowledge that even apex predators are capable of behaviors once thought impossible. The chain of events that began with water on a scorching day has become a foundational study in the cognitive and social complexity of lions, a story that will continue to inform research, conservation strategies, and public understanding for generations to come. KM27 patrols the boundaries of his territory with the confidence of a fully recovered apex predator. I watch him often from a distance, the amber eyes still observant, still aware, a living testament to the extraordinary connection forged under the harshest conditions. Science may debate, colleagues may question, and protocols may constrain. Yet one truth remains. In the unlikeliest of circumstances, empathy, courage, and understanding can bridge the gap between species and redefine the limits of what we thought we knew. And it all began with a simple act of compassion, one small gesture that changed the course of multiple lives forever.